Welcome back to Release Your Inner Power podcast. I have a special guest, Karaleigh, with us today. Hi, how are you doing today?
I'm awesome. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm making it through this cold snap, but
Yes.
taking it one day at a time.
I'm looking forward to warm weather.
I know. I know, me too. It's only January and I'm like, ooh, let's make this happen sooner. Well, welcome, and I'm so happy to have you on. I'm excited to see what our conversation is going to be and where it's going to go today. So tell me a little bit about you as far as just your little bit of background, and then move into, your journey and story of who Karaleigh is and how she got to where she's at today.
So, the me in a nutshell is I'm a singer-songwriter, I'm a podcast host, and I have 3 kids with special needs, and my husband's been disabled for a decade. That's the short version.
Yeah. Wow, I have so many questions.
I know.
So let's start from that. Let's start from the beginning. Share with me a story or a path of what have you of, just how you got to where you are of being a mama, singer-songwriter, and how you kind of navigate through all of that.
Yeah, there's so much. Our stories are always so big and they take a lifetime, right? They take a long time. So I've always wanted to be a singer, and I've always been big and outgoing and really passionate about life. And I went to college with this intention of getting into the School of Music and singing opera. And so I went off to college at 18, and then I met and married my husband in my first semester, not just in my first semester at 18, but met and married him in 7 weeks at 18 years old. So that was a really crazy kind of thing to do, but I just knew, like I just met him and I was like, that's it. That's he's the right one. And we got married. We met in October, we got married in November, and it was just it. And we just celebrated our 15-year anniversary. And I'm 33, I've like lived 6 lifetimes by now, and it's been a wild ride. And so I auditioned for the School of Music right about the same time that we were planning our wedding really quick, and I didn't get in, and I was totally devastated, and I switched my major, and it wasn't very long after that, only about 18 months later, that we had our first. It was life moved on really quickly from my dreams, and we had our first up here in Utah. We went to BYU, and then we felt really strongly that we needed to move out to California, which is where I grew up and where my parents lived. We moved out there. We had our second, and then we moved out to it's a long story. It's a really wild journey. Then we moved out to Texas and we lived near his parents, and we had our third. And when we moved out to Texas, my husband became disabled. And it wasn't like an accident. It wasn't like a sudden thing. It was like he has a genetic chromosomal defect called familial episodic ataxia. And so it was kind of a slow thing that came on. He also has severe debilitating PTSD and anxiety and depression. And so it was over the course of the first like 5 years of our marriage that his health just declined really severely. And so right about 5 years in, we got to the point where he could not work anymore. And it was right about the time when our third was born, where he couldn't work, and he couldn't even stand up on his own for very long. Like, he kept collapsing. And that was the biggest part of his disability, was that anytime he experienced too much stress, whether it was emotional or physical, he would collapse and he would tremble and shake, and he wouldn't be able to speak. He would stutter, and I'd have to carry him to bed, and he'd be in that state for, half a day to a few days, and it would take him a while to recover. And so that was us in Texas for several years of just kind of navigating that. But along that same time was when our kids were diagnosed with autism. And we had two that were diagnosed with autism, and our youngest hadn't been diagnosed yet. Although I was pulling my hair out going, there's something here. He was eventually diagnosed with autism, but his autism looks different. And there's this thing that they say that, you've met one kid with autism, you've met one kid with autism. Autism tends to show up differently in different kiddos, and his is different. Let's just call it that. So right now, how it looks, my kids are 13, 12, and 9, and my oldest and my youngest are high functioning, and then my middle is very severe. So at that time living in Texas, life was really wild. I was not living any of my dreams because I was a caretaker to my 3 kids and to my husband, and we got this intuitive, you know, we're very religious. We felt really strongly like we needed to move back to Utah, and we were like and finish our college degrees at BYU. And it had been a decade at this point since we had lived here and been working on our degrees, and we were like, that's crazy. And we got approved for SSI, and we were going, it's finally possible, but this seems crazy. My husband he was now on 12 different medications, finally kind of stabilized, sort of. He was still collapsing all the time, but we had all the doctors established. We had all the therapies established for him and for all the kids. We had all the kids in all their classes and all their therapies. They were going to 4 hours of therapy after school every day. It was like a really tentative, stable situation. He still wasn't working, but now we had SSI, and it was like, okay, now move away from the support system, because we lived a couple blocks from his parents. And it was move away from all of that and go live in Utah, which his grandmother lived about an hour away from the college, but like she was like 90. She wasn't going to be a super ton of hands-on help with our wild crew. And so we prayed about it a lot, and we decided to take this huge leap of faith and move back to Utah. And in my praying about it, like I got to the point where I was like, okay, I know that's what we're supposed to do. You can stop telling me now, God. I get it. Like, that's what we're supposed to do. But I was like, okay, are we going to be okay? Like, are we going to survive this? Are we going to be okay? And I
Yeah.
got this really clear answer of, it's not just going to be okay. It's going to be amazing. And I was like, okay, take you up on this. So that was about halfway through 2018. And what followed was the worst year of our lives. So then by the time that the pandemic hit and it was like, oh, the world's falling apart, I was like, wait, this is it? All we have to do is stay home? That's the word. Oh, I can handle that. I can handle that.
Right.
So we moved back to Utah, away from my husband's, because we had lived in California near my parents, and then we lived in Texas near his parents. And so we moved away from all the grandparents. And in Texas, I mean, they were watching our kids all the time while I took my husband to the hospital, which was often because he was frequently having crisis after crisis. So we moved away from our support system, and it was really scary. And we had all these different really ridiculous, awful trials. Like, we tried to move into this house and we put down a deposit in 2 months' rent. And then when my husband went to go look at it, there was a huge hole in the backyard. And we were like, that's not safe. Like, we can't, like, we have 3 kids with autism. My husband can't walk without a cane. And he's like 30. Like, we can't move in here unless you guys fix the giant hole in the backyard. And they were like, oh no, you have to climb in there to like change the filters. And we were like, no, he's disabled. Like, he can't do that. And we were like, okay, well, we can't live here. And we had never moved in, and they decided to take us to court and keep all of our money when we never moved in. And they sued us into oblivion. And it was, they just kept all the money. They threatened to sue us if we tried to get our money back, basically. So we had that huge deal, and then we moved in to a different house, which I called our miracle house, and I was so excited. And then a week before Christmas, so we moved in around August. Week before Christmas, the landlord showed up, and we'd never met him in our lives. And he showed up at the front door, and we were like, we don't know who you are. And he pointed his gun in my husband's face, like out of the blue. And we were like, and it just, my husband with his debilitating PTSD that he'd been working on for years, it just tore him apart and thing after thing after thing. But the worst thing was the story that I will tell you that changed my whole life. So we moved back to Utah in around August 2018, and we went back to college full time as students. My husband and I were both full time at BYU, and then we had 3 kids at 3 different schools because my daughter, who's high functioning, was able to get into this regular school, and then Joshua, so she was probably, I think she had just turned 8, so she was in second grade, and Joshua was in first grade, but he's severely autistic, so they wouldn't let him into the same school she was in, so he had to be in a special school. He was severely autistic and completely and utterly nonverbal. And this, you have to understand who Joshua was. Joshua was my wild child. I mean, Benjamin also was wild in his own way. Benjamin was my high functioning youngest, and he was probably 3 or 4 at the time, and he was in preschool. But Joshua was my kiddo who I had to keep the front door locked because he would run out the front door and open the neighbor's car while they were driving. Like, he was my kiddo who, when we would get to a parking lot, he would be out the front door of our van before I could unbuckle my seatbelt because the sliding doors were child locked. He'd be out of his seatbelt, out the front door, halfway across the parking lot before I could click unbuckle on my seatbelt because all he wanted to do was open other people's cars. It took everything I had to keep him safe. He was a danger to himself all the time. It was wild. And I had this moment probably a week before this whole thing went down where I mean, we had come from being in Texas where we had 4 hours of therapy after school every day. Like, therapy was our life. So much therapy. And then we moved to Utah where we were on wait lists for a year to get therapy. And I had this moment where I was like, my 7-year-old doesn't talk. He doesn't have a single sound that means anything after so much therapy. And I went on and I call it my like Facebook meltdown where I like went on live Facebook and I just like sobbed and I was like, I give up. I cannot keep hoping that my son's ever going to talk. I can't keep hoping for this. My son's never going to say, Mom. He's never going to say, I love you. And I can't keep hoping for this. It's killing me because our whole family was praying every night that he would have a voice one day, that he'd be able to talk. And when you have your like 3-year-old praying every night with the family that his brother will be able to talk one day, and you have so much therapy and nothing is helping. And you're like, this is the path. I know the path. You do therapy and they learn to talk and they make improvements, and it wasn't working. So I had my whole Facebook meltdown and I basically gave up. I gave up. I was like, I can't do it anymore. And so it was only like a week later that this whole thing happened. And it's one of those things that like, it's like seared into my mind. He came out of his room, and it was the very first Saturday of October. And he came out of his room that morning, and he liked to only wear like his pull up to bed because he still wasn't fully potty trained at 7. And he came out of his room with just his pull up, and he looked awful. He looked like he had lost a whole bunch of weight overnight. And he looked like you could see this thigh gap and you could see all of his ribs. And he looked like just awful. And he walked out of his room instead of bouncing out of his room and running full force. And I had this, my mind split where I was like, part of me is going, this is kind of nice. Maybe I can be a little bit chill today. Maybe I can calm down today. Maybe we can have a nice chill day and I can be a little bit less, he's just sick. Everything's going to be fine. And then the other part of my mom, mama bear is going wild over here going, he's dying. Something's horribly wrong. Like, look at him. He looks He looks totally awful. Like, what's happening here? And I let the logical part of my mind take over, like, he's fine. It's gonna be fine. And he walked slowly into the living room and curled up into a ball on the floor. And he stayed there the whole weekend. And he sat in my lap and he cuddled with me, which he would never do. Like, it was like, this, who is this kid? This is not the same kid he was before. And so by Monday, he was still like this. He was still really sick. And so I took him to the pediatrician, and he was so weak that I had to carry him out of the car and into the pediatrician's office. And he curled up in a ball on the floor of the pediatrician's office. And she barely looked at him. She was like, "Oh, it's just a stomach bug and he's got autism. And, I guess we could get blood, but he has autism and it's really hard to get a blood sample from a kid with autism." And I'm like, I've got 3 kids. Like, I'm not new here. This is not like any stomach bug I've ever seen. This looks different to me. And she's going, "No," and she just totally wrote us off and sent us home with nothing. She did nothing. And she sent us home, and so we went home. And now, my husband and I are still full-time college students, so we're trading off who's missing all their classes to stay home with the sick kid. And so a couple days later, I was sitting in my class and my husband was home, and he texted me a picture of Joshua, who was laying in bed. And Joshua looked drastically worse. And I looked at this picture, and Joshua's eyes were sunken in and his skin was turning gray. And I took one look at that picture and I was like, no, no, nope, I'm done. And I stood up and I left my class and I took him to the ER because I was like, I'm done watching my kid die in front of my eyes. Like, this is it. I'm done. And I carried that kid into the ER. And they took one look at him and they were like, "We know exactly what's wrong. We need blood from this kid right now." And I tell you what, it took a team of 5 grown men and me holding him down because he fought like a freaking saber-toothed tiger to keep us from getting that drop of blood. But all it took was one drop of blood, and it was confirmed that Joshua was in DKA, diabetic ketoacidosis, and he was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And he was definitely dying in front of us. And they sent us off to a different hospital, and he was admitted for 3 days. And I was just in total shock because I'm going, diabetes. My scrawny, skinny little underweight 7-year-old? Diabetes is for old fat people. What are you talking about? I didn't know anything about juvenile diabetes. I was like, what are you talking? What? So we got admitted to this hospital and we get there and I'm going, "You don't understand who this kid is. He is going to burn down this hospital. He's going to change the language on all your computers to Japanese. Like, you don't know what this kid's capable of. As soon as he wakes up, he's going to tear this place to the ground. Like, you don't know what he's capable of." And they were so amazing. And they had a nurse just sit at the door and just sit there and guard the door in case Josh woke up so that I could sleep. And then the next day, they had me go to parent training. And I learned all about how I was going to have to watch every single bite of food he takes for the rest of his life and give him insulin and dose him with needles for the rest of his life, multiple times a day to keep him alive. And I had a moment where I, had it out with God. And I was like, "Remember that whole thing you said about okay and amazing?" And I was like, this doesn't fit that for me. This doesn't fit okay. And this definitely doesn't fit amazing. And I wasn't very happy. And I come back to that moment over and over and over again in my life, because that is such an important moment. Because in our lives, when things get really hard, we have such a hard time seeing past what's happening right now and seeing beyond the horrible thing that we think is impossible to get past. And because I know what happened in Josh's story and I know the miracle that took place, I can look at my whatever thing is happening in my life now and I can go, oh, maybe I just can't see the whole picture yet. Maybe there's more to the story. Maybe I just need to wait for the next part to be revealed. So Joshua was sent home from the hospital after a few days. He was in there Wednesday and Thursday and Friday. And he went back to school on Monday and he pooped in the potty for the first time in his life. And we had spent like 4 years trying to poop potty train this kid. Like we'd been in intensive therapy trying to potty train him, but he wasn't eating enough to be able to poop regularly enough to be potty trained. But he went back to school, pooped in the potty for the first time in his life, which probably had something to do with him finally eating enough for the first time in his life, because he'd been so underweight for so long that we had like put him on medication to try to increase his appetite. But once he was on insulin and getting the insulin and what his body needed, he was suddenly starving. And don't get me wrong, he wasn't like, yay, let me eat vegetables and healthy food. No, he was just eating corn dogs. That was the only thing he would eat. He was eating like 9 corn dogs a day. So we were going to Costco to buy like huge boxes of corn dogs. But he was finally eating enough to go to the bathroom regularly. And the really amazing thing is that within a month, he could say all of his colors. And from that moment on, his speech skyrocketed. And within a year, I was wishing and begging him to shut up because he wouldn't stop talking all the time. And he would say, "Shut up," to grandma and grandpa on Skype and on FaceTime as a joke. It was his way of saying, "I love you." And he would say, "I love you," when he wanted you to shut up and hang up the phone call. And he now is 12 and he has this thing called childhood apraxia of speech, which makes him kind of hard to understand, but he's actually gotten over that a lot. He's pretty easy to understand now. And I have this thing that I love to say that is, there's blessings in every trial and there's trials in every blessing. And I'm now, wishing just a little bit that he was a little bit harder to understand, because his favorite thing to say these days is penis jokes. And so he likes to yell penis popsicle and penis dad and penis Katie and penis every other word in his vocabulary because he thinks it's really, really funny. And so does every teenage kid in his middle school right now because he's 12. And it's very much eye-opening to me to be like, I prayed for this. I prayed for this. I prayed so hard that Joshua would have a voice. And here it is. There he is saying whatever he wants to say. And it's amazing how I gave up control and it happened in a completely different way than I ever would have expected. And now the other part of this story is that, so we went back to BYU. And we got married in 2008. I auditioned for the School of Music to pursue opera in 2008. And then 2018 was when we came back to BYU. And I was like, this is my year. I'm going to audition for the School of Music again. And this is it. This is my time. This is the reason why everything's been so hard. This is it. It's my turn. I'm going to get in the School of Music. I'm going to pursue all my dreams. I'm going to sing opera. I'm going to be the star in the front of the stage. And so Joshua was diagnosed in October, and then I auditioned for the School of Music in December. And one thing you have to understand is that it wasn't like Joshua was diagnosed on Wednesday and then Friday he was released from the hospital and then Monday I was like, oh, he talks now. What a gift diabetes is. No, it takes time. You look back at your story in hindsight and you go, oh, now I can see it as I look back over like a long period of time. And so it wasn't like I realized immediately all of these like amazing life lessons. And so I auditioned in December and I got through the first round. And so I went to the second round of auditions in like January. And then I found out in February that I did not get in. And you should know I was really, really close. They only let like 3 or 4 people in each year. And they actually reached out to me to tell me not to give up, which I don't think they do that very often because they didn't do it my first time when I auditioned. But they sent me an email and they were like, you are so close. Do not give up. Go audition for this school, this school, and this school. Like, you were so close. But I was so devastated. It was one of those moments, one of those like deer in the headlights, like this is the end of the world kind of moments where I was like, ah, my life is over. I'm never gonna sing again. Like I must be the worst singer ever. And so they sent me that email and it just went over my head because I was so lost in how devastated I was that I didn't get in the School of Music. So I had many months where I could not sing without just crying. But eventually, as Joshua began to talk and as these realizations started to come, I started to have realizations about myself and about my music journey. Like maybe I can still sing and it just has to look a little differently than I planned. If Josh can talk and it can look differently than I planned, then maybe I could still sing and it can look a little differently than I thought. And then I had these other realizations like, wait a minute, I actually don't even like opera that much. I love singing opera, but I don't like listening to opera. It's not like it's my favorite genre. I actually don't love listening to opera. I don't like going to the opera. I just like singing it because it's really challenging and fun. I like singing the high, fancy diva notes, but I don't really love listening to it. Like maybe there's something to that. And then I actually um started studying costume design instead as my degree. And I realized, okay, I don't love being in the background, designing costumes and makeup for the people who are in the spotlight. Um, but wait a minute, I don't want to be in the spotlight with other people designing my makeup and costumes. I want to design my own makeup and costumes. And if I'd actually gotten my dream here and been, the diva in the center stage, like other people would be telling me what to do the whole time. Because when you're the opera star, you make none of your own choices. The director tells you where to move and where to stand. Like somebody else is telling you how to sing. You don't sing any of your own lyrics. Like you make none of your own choices. Someone else is telling you what to do the whole time. Wait a minute, that's not actually what I want for my life. And then I was like, wait a minute. If I had actually gotten this dream I've been dreaming of for 20 years, I would be gone from my kids at in performances or in rehearsals like all the time, like every night. Wait, that's not what I actually want for my life. Oh my gosh, I never took the time to actually think about this dream that I had set my whole sights on, my whole heart and soul on. I never really thought about the actual impact on my life and if I really even wanted that impact, if I really even wanted the life it would lead to. Maybe there was a little bit of a gift in not getting into the School of Music after all. And so I pivoted and I studied sewing and costume design, but I also took a songwriting class and I hadn't written music since like middle school and high school because I had actually written a song in high school and posted it on YouTube and got a bunch of trolls telling me that I was really fat, and I decided that I would not, that I was too fat to be on stage. And that's why I pursued opera, because I was lacking the confidence that I deserved to be on stage for just being me. It was like, oh, it was a gift all along. Like diabetes ended up being a gift all along. Maybe this huge, horrible trial that for a minute I saw as the worst thing in the whole world. Maybe there was a gift in it. So I started writing my own music and I graduated from college and I was like, great, now it's finally my turn to do what I actually want to do with my life. Okay, what do I want to do with my life? I want to sing. That's what I've always wanted to do. I want to sing, but I want to be in charge. And I started writing my own music and I started going, okay, what's the name of this thing? And I learned about podcasting. And it all sort of came together and it was so inspired and it was Seeking Sunshine. And it was Seeking Sunshine's now the name of my podcast and the name of my album and the name of my single. And it was like, that's the thing. And it took, my podcast is now over 2 years old and the album came out slowly as the podcast emerged. And it took time, as everything does. It takes time for us to grow and to become more confident and to step into our story and into our power. It took time. And eventually I was like, okay, Seeking Sunshine's amazing, but how do I really hone in on, who I'm talking to and what I really love about it? And I rebranded Seeking Sunshine like a year and a half into it. And it's Seeking Sunshine, do what lights you up. And as I went through that whole process of like, oh my gosh, I want to talk to moms about doing what you love the most. And that's what I love talking about. And then I realized, oh my gosh, talking about podcasting is my favorite thing in the whole world. I could talk about podcasting all day long. And you can tell because when I talk about podcasting, like my whole demeanor changes and I get really lit up. And I'm like, I love talking about podcasting. And it was like, oh, like that's it. And you can tell because when there's a change in you. There's a change that comes over you when you start talking about the thing that lights you up, the thing that you really love. And when you start leaning into that thing, you just start glowing. You just start glowing. And so I finally gave myself permission to lean into the thing I really love. And so I started teaching podcasting and I started a second podcast and it's called Podcast Like a Mother, and it's been such an amazing journey. And it really was, it's not just going to be okay, it's going to be amazing. It became amazing. And the other part of that story that I didn't share yet was that like along those few years my husband got better. Like he went from walking on a cane all the time to ditching he stopped walking on a cane and started doing like Tai Chi and yoga. And now he jogs for fun sometimes. He ditched his 12 medications and traded them for medical marijuana. And it's, he's doing so much better. Like he is still considered disabled, but he is an entirely different person. Like if you met him now, you would not believe what that he ever was the person he was before. Like most of the people, like it's just incredible the change that has come over him as well. Like our whole family has been through a miracle over the last few years. He went back to college and he had to walk across campus. And for a while, like he couldn't walk across campus. Like he'd get stuck halfway through, but he kept doing it until he was able to. And now he has a full-time job and he's in the top 3 of his nationwide company. And like he's doing amazing. And it's incredible to see where we are now. So there's my rant for you. There's my
I,
story for you.
I feel like I want to say so many things at the same time. I'm super speechless because that is such an amazing story. I mean, like inspiring, encouraging. There's so many good things in there to to like touch on. I don't even know where to start. Um, I mean, first of all, you are an amazing, amazing person to be able to go through, those challenges and to really like see and question in a way of curiosity to see what other avenues and things, or just being okay with maybe it's not the right timing, or maybe I need to wait, or maybe this isn't the way and maybe it's another way. To be able to do that and not stay stuck when I call them tornadoes, right? When there's tornadoes that are surrounding you constantly and you are trying to navigate those storms and take care of yourself. And you like every time you were presented with something, you're like, oop, okay, hold on a second. And then you would be able to work through it and like you said, give yourself permission and then to come out on the other side and then be like, oh, even though you might not have your answer right away, how you worked through it. And then eventually when you looked back, you're like, now I see. Now I see what this was meant for and what this means. And you had to walk through, you had to walk through that storm in order to get to the other side to see all of this, right? There's so many amazing things. Thank you for sharing your story. I mean, your story
Well,
is
and it
awesome.
really helps to tell your story 100,000 times to get to those insights. Because, like,
Yeah.
it wasn't like I just, had these insights once. It's like I've been telling this story a lot of times, and the more you tell your story, the more you go, "Oh, oh, I see how the pieces fit together."
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, through everything, um, and you painted a very awesome picture, by the way, with how you told your story. So I loved all of it. How did you like through these times of, having to work through, aside from you taking a step and checking in with yourself, what else did you do for yourself to kind of keep your sanity as well as keep going? Like I know you said at one point there was a time where you were like, I give up. This is not, this isn't it. Like, but you didn't until that point. So what were some things that you may have done or told yourself or, conversations, anything? Like what were some of the things that you did to get you through those hard times?
Well, so first of all, I gave up a lot. Um, I have many times where I've been like, I give up. This is not gonna work. It's the end of the world. Those happen a lot, and then I'm like, okay, now I'm better. I'm gonna keep going now. So it's not that you don't give up, it's just that you change your mind and then you keep going again. That's more accurate. My favorite answer to this question is that creativity is therapeutic. I love making things. I've been a maker for like my whole life. And I find that when you make things, you find your power. And you have to find your power when you feel powerless. And it's really, really easy to feel powerless when life is, crushing you, when the tornadoes are coming and everything's falling apart around you because there's so much of life that we cannot control. But there are some things that we can control. Like, I know I'm trying to find something around me that I have made, but it's been a while. Right now, I'm making digital things and less physical things because my kids destroy things. So I'm like, right now, I write music. Like, I write custom podcast songs and I write songs for my album. So I'm like, I make things. So when my kids were little and like everything was I was making I was making Halloween costumes for them. I was making decor for our house. I love sewing and like physically making things. Like a lot of people love baking or painting or like whatever. Stick your hands into something, tear fabric apart, like make something. Like when the existential parts of your life are crumbling, you can physically control things with your hands. Like go buy something from a thrift store and make it better. Like you can go paint a piece of furniture and if you hate it, then paint it a different color. Like there's something you can do with your hands to that you have power over. And you can learn from YouTube. You can learn from wherever of how to, you know, gain more skills in how to make things with greater skill, but that's not the point. The point is to have the ability to physically manipulate something because then you can feel more powerful when you don't feel like you have power. So have made a lot of things over the years. So very many things I have made. Um, so that's my advice there is that creativity is therapeutic. Find something that you can manipulate and have power over because it'll make you feel stronger because you have power over something. Find it.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that, like you said, making something and then having it. But then if you have that something that you've made, it's also a reminder of how you felt, right? It'll take you back to, how you felt when you were making it and when you're done and when you can like show other people and stuff too. It's like a constant reminder of that, of that.
Yeah, like my husband paints, and one of his favorite paintings he painted when he was really, really mad at our son. And he's like, this one turned out better than like all my other ones. And it was like an anger painting, and it's like, do it. And
Yeah.
like his are super abstract paintings, and it's like, go paint. And it doesn't like let go of perfectionism, let go of how like the supposed tos and the way other people do things. Like just go be creative. Creativity gets to be messy, it gets to be imperfect, it gets to be impulsive, it gets to be whatever. You
Mhm.
know, it can be rearranging your furniture because you freaking can, right? Like sometimes what
Yeah.
you really need to do is rearrange your living room because you just need something fresh. Like
Yeah,
some
there is
like
something to be said about that, like how you feel after, or doing like, where you clean out your closet or like you said, rearrange your furniture or you just change it up. When you change it up, it can
yeah.
change. It changes a lot more than just changing the room. Like when you're
Yeah, well, and
physically
it's
doing that and moving it, right? It changes a lot more with you and not just that particular.
yeah, and it's using your body and your muscles, but it's also using your brain to and you're getting your mind off of all the other things you can't control. You're like, okay, here's a problem. And I'm a sewer, so like a lot of my stuff is fabric and it's like okay I can put two pieces of fabric together and I can sew it. That's a problem I can solve. Like that thread didn't sew right, how can I solve that problem and getting my brain onto that problem instead of on the my husband's depressed and I can't fix that, like getting like I can't fix that, like even a therapist can't fix that. That's something, that's like deep 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 work. Like but what can I fix? Fabric.
Mhm.
I can deal with the fabric, I can paint something, I can move the couch. Like, those are things I can have physical power over.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I love that. Thank you for sharing. So you did say like what lights you up. That's usually what I like to know is like what lights you up and how you help others. Can we dive into that a little bit more?
Yes, I love that topic.
So you said that you love podcasting and then I heard a little squeak about you make podcast songs. And then, there's a lot you're like you have a lot of things that you like to do and I love all of it. I love all of it. But tell me more about your podcasting and your songs and things of that nature.
So, where this all started from was like, I want to use my voice. I'm a singer-songwriter and but I never wanted to just sing and I never wanted to just talk. I wanted to do both. And podcasting has been the means to be able to do both. Like I wrote Seeking Sunshine, the song, as the introduction for my podcast before I had even started my podcast. And it was like, yes, that's it. And then I am able to put the songs from my album at the end of each of my podcast episodes. And I'm able to like use my talents as a songwriter to write custom intro songs for other podcasters. It all like works together and it's incredible. It's incredible to be able to use all of your skills and all the parts of yourself in one thing instead of feeling split. And
Mhm.
for me, that's what podcasting does. So I love it. I love it.
I
Like I
love
just finished someone else's custom song and I was like, that's going at the end of my podcast and I can give her a shout out for her podcast. And it was like, yay. So
That's so fun. I love it when you end up I can understand what you're saying about when you do something that lights you up and gets you excited. I too, when I do podcasts and I meet wonderful people and talk to them and like do this, like I'm gonna be like for the rest of the day now after doing this with you, I'm just gonna be like do 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 like totally on and like all happy and just like I can't wait for the next one. And so I totally understand what you're saying, how it lights you up and you just want to do
yeah.
more of
Well,
it.
and
So
that's
much.
the magic of podcasting is like it's accessible to everyone, but like the connections that we get to make with people, how often in your day do you just sit and talk to somebody?
Right.
Like without doing anything else, without multitasking. Like, I mean, I other than podcasting, I hate to tell you, I'm never not multitasking.
Right.
Like, I'm always multitasking. If I'm sitting talking to a friend, if I'm sitting and talking to my husband, I'm always doing something else at the same time. But when I'm podcasting, I am just focused on you and your story. I'm just talking to you. And it's like, this is what social media is missing is the deep
Yeah.
connection and the just focusing on other people part. Like this is what we really need. This is what we're really missing is actually connecting with each other on a deep level.
Yes. I love that. I love that. I That's so true. I think that's why I like it too, because I get to meet all these really awesome people and I get to hear all these awesome stories and then I get to share it, right? And share it
Yeah.
and put it out there so it can help somebody else. And it just that's the part that I also love is being able to share your story to help somebody else, even if it just touched them to listen to it, and just
Yeah.
having fun with it. I just love that part. It's my favorite part.
Me too.
So how what I like to ask all of my wonderful guests that I have on is um I like to ask them about their superpower because I believe that we all have many different types and kinds depending on our path and journey and what we do. And there's something that always shines the brightest that we are aware of, and sometimes we're not. And so I like people to share what their superpower is in hopes to shed some light on others that may not see it or give ideas on, oh, maybe I do also have that and it is a superpower. So what is your
Mm.
power?
My superpower is breaking down complicated things into manageable pieces. So for example, like I teach podcasting made easy. A lot of people look at podcasting and they go, "Oh my gosh, this is overwhelming. It's so difficult." And I'm like, "No, let me show you how simple it can be." And I realized that like this was my superpower because I was like showing people like, "No, no, let me show you. This gets to be easy." And then I was like, "Well, wait a minute. I've been doing this as a mom for a really long time. Like, oh, your room's overwhelmingly messy. Let me show you how to break it down into just pick up the shoes. Only focus on the shoes. Okay, now just focus on the dirty laundry. We're just gonna get all the dirty laundry right now. Oh, don't think about anything. Like, we're just gonna break it down. So that's what I'm really good at. I'm really good at breaking down overwhelming things and making them manageable. And if you don't mind, I'm going to share like a way that other people can find their superpower.
Please do.
That's all right. And
Yeah.
hopefully this isn't too like woo woo for people because I just was realizing this. And I decided I'm gonna add it as a bonus for my podcasting class because I think it's really powerful. I started learning about human design. Are you familiar with human design at all?
Yes, I love
I
human design.
kind of
Yes.
love human design. I'm actually a mental projector, which most people are like, "You're a mental projector? You have so much energy. How do you?" Because I feed off of other people's energy. I'm a 5/1 mental projector, but I I started looking into human design because I wanted to get to know my kids better because I have 3 kids with autism, and I was like, I'm having a hard time understanding my kids. I want to get to know their superpowers better so that I can teach them better. And what I ended up learning was all this stuff about myself, which is the researcher part of me. But you can find your superpowers in your human design. You really can. If you go start to look at your human design, like your superpowers are written in there. And you can start looking, especially at like the top four parts. They're your, I know I'm not like a super pro at this, but like your, oh, I'm gonna remember what it's called. Your incarnation cross. The top four numbers right there, and you can go look up what the gates are called. And your channels. If you go look up what those things mean, those are your superpowers. Like they're written there for you. And like my superpower of breaking things down, that's written in my chart. Like it's right there. That and like the joy of life and being alive. And like that's also my superpower. And that's also written in my chart. Like the sunshine part, it's literally written in my chart, which I only started learning about human design like last April. So it's not even been a whole year. So I started all this before I knew that. But if you're not sure what your superpower is and you're wanting to learn, you can go look in there and you might be like, oh, I've been doing this my whole life. I didn't realize that that could be a superpower. So that's what I would encourage you to do is go check that out.
I love that you said that. I love that you said taking complicated things and breaking it down. That is awesome, awesome, awesome. And I love that you brought up human design. I'm also a projector. So
Yeah.
I think that's great. I did the same thing as you. I wanted to learn about human design to better understand my children because our how we operate is very different, and I wanted to have it enhance and bring us together and closer more, and for
Yeah.
have understanding, and therefore, as you said, you learn more stuff and then you dive in because human design you can do surface stuff and really get like your basic foundation, and you can go all the way in and it can be like this whole thing. You can get really detailed and you can see all the things, and I love it. It's like a map for you to understand yourself, why you do the things you do, behavior, anything, decisions, all the things. I mean, you name it, it's on there. And so I love it. It's like a clear map for you, and then you can get all of your information. So thank you for actually bringing that up because I think that's a great idea. I think it also helped me as well when I dove into that. To understand even why, like, oh, I do that, and this is why I do that.
Yeah.
Or how can I better enhance my life? Like as a projector, we have times where we're on, and then we have times that we got to rest, and we have to listen to that. Otherwise, we're like literally running from an empty tank 24/7. And that does nothing because then when we're on, we're not really on. It's kind of like a flickery flame, not like a bright, shiny light. And so that's needed for us to pay attention to. And I did not realize that until I dove into it. I was like, why am I tired all the time? Well, hello. There's my
Yes.
answer, right? There's
Well,
my
and
answer.
I didn't realize how much my kids' energy were affecting me because two of my kids are MGs, are manifesting generators. And then what's funny is Joshua is actually an emotional or an emo, what is it called? He's a projector as well. He's an emo projected, what's that called? Emo projected projector. So he's
Mhm.
like really sure of himself. And I've noticed that like when I'm around him, I'm like more confident in myself. And I'm like, oh, it's really amazing.
Yeah, it's
Then
funny that you say
also,
that.
yeah. And
Because
then when
I
I'm
have
around,
3 projectors in my house and 1 generator. I feel
yeah,
so
I'm
bad for
surrounded.
him. I'm
Well,
like,
and
you're
it's,
supplying all of this for 3 projectors, buddy. I'm so sorry.
yeah. And then I'm so like Joshua and I are projectors, but my husband's a generator. And then my other two kids are manifesting generators, and it's like exhausting to be around. But then we're all, except for Joshua, all of us are, well, Aurora's a 5-2, but the other ones are, we're all 5-1s.
Oh, that's
We're
interesting too.
all 5-1s. We're all trying to lead. We are all trying to be in charge of this house. And I was like, oh, that's why. That explains so much about my house. That's why we're always fighting to be in charge. Like that makes so much sense. We're all trying to lead.
Yeah.
Oh,
I know it's so amazing, like the information you
yeah.
can receive,
Yeah.
but then it like helps you navigate. So
Yeah.
navigate more. So it's more than just finding out your superpower.
Yes, it is
It's so much
so much,
more.
but finding your superpower is a great benefit.
Yes, it is, and very helpful. So thank you for bringing that up. I can go on and on and on about
I
that
know, me too.
because I love that stuff. So thank you for sharing it. Well, it was so good to have you on. Your story is amazing. You are an amazing person, and I'm so glad that you took this time to have this conversation with me and share your story.
Well, thank you for having me.